Good evening, all, and welcome back. Tonight, I want you to picture the stillness of the woods, the way the night seems to press down heavier when you're far from towns, phones, or the comfort of human voices. These stories are not tall tales, not fireside inventions. They are documented accounts from hikers, campers, and locals who swore they'd never speak of what they saw, until they did. Usually after sleepless nights and too many unanswered questions. Camping has always been seen as a retreat, a chance to escape the noise of modern life. But when you step into those forests, you're also stepping into places where rules change, where voices can carry farther than they should, and where light doesn't always behave the way you expect. In some cases, these events are noted in ranger reports, missing person records, and old newspaper clippings. In others, they linger only in whispered recollections from people who know they'll never sleep the same again. As always, if these stories unsettle you, I ask that you support this channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and tap the bell. Not for me, but so these accounts aren't lost to silence. Because silence, out here, is rarely empty. Now, let us begin with our first story. I've always been a solo camper. Not because I don't like people, I do, but because something in me craves silence. The kind of silence you only find deep in the woods, hours from the nearest road. No voices, no hum of electricity, just the sound of your own breath and maybe a few dry leaves twitching under a squirrel's feet. Last October, I drove up north toward the state line. No service, no marked campsites, just vast forest reserve that hikers rarely enter past the second ridge. I parked at the base of a fire road, slung my pack over my shoulder, and headed uphill until my legs felt like they were burning. When I found a small clearing beside a tree-laced ravine, I knew I'd found the spot. It was empty, still, untouched. The days were short that time of year, and the sun dipped low behind the trees by 5:30 p.m. I set up my one-man tent, stacked a few stones for a fire ring, and hung my lantern, a simple kerosene one, on a thick branch jutting from a crooked pine. It cast a warm circle of light, just enough to push the darkness back a few feet. I remember that first evening clearly. The forest around me was alive with sound. Crickets chirping, the occasional distant owl, branches creaking high above. I boiled some beans over my fire and scribbled in my journal, noting how peaceful the silence felt compared to the noise of my apartment. I even recorded a voice memo on my phone. Night 1. Perfect conditions. Feels good to disappear for a while. I crawled into my tent around 9:08 p.m., left the lantern burning outside, and lay there staring at the thin fabric above me, watching shadows shift as the lantern's flame danced in the wind. I drifted off easily. Then, sometime past midnight, I woke up, not all at once, but the way you do when something has changed. Like your body senses a shift before your mind catches up. It wasn't a noise that woke me. It was the absence of one. The wind had stopped. Earlier, it had been moving steadily through the branches, a constant low whisper like ocean surf. Now, nothing. Just stillness. Heavy, absolute stillness. I sat up, my breath held for no reason I could name. My tent was dimly lit by the lantern outside. But something felt wrong. The shadows weren't behaving the same. They were twitching, jerking. I unzipped the tent just a few inches and looked out. The lantern was swinging. Not gently, not from a leftover breeze. It was whipping back and forth like someone had just shoved it. I watched it swing, wide, aggressive arcs. There was no wind, not even a leaf rustling, and then I heard it. A breath. It wasn't mine. It was low, like someone exhaling through their teeth, somewhere just beyond the fire ring. Maybe 10 feet out. I didn't move. I didn't unzip the flap any further. I just stared at the swinging lantern as the breathing grew louder, raspy, rhythmic. For a second, I convinced myself it was an animal, maybe a deer sniffing around the coals. But the breathing didn't shift, didn't change. It was too steady, too human. I pulled the zipper up slowly and sat frozen inside the tent, every muscle tight, my ears tuned for the slightest sound. The breathing stopped. Then the lantern made a metallic creak, like it was being unhooked. I couldn't help it. I held my phone up inside the tent, unlocked it, and opened the camera. I turned on the video and hit record. I wasn't thinking clearly, just instinct. If I vanished out here, someone would find the phone. Minutes passed. Nothing. The lantern still glowed outside, now swinging slower but unnaturally slow, like it was resisting gravity. I dared myself to look again. I unzipped just enough to peek, and what I saw made no sense. There were 2 lanterns now. One still hung from the pine branch. Mine. The second sat across from it, hanging on a tree at the far edge of the clearing, about 15 feet away. Identical design. Same warm, flickering glow. But I only brought one. I crawled back into my sleeping bag, pulled it up to my chin, and didn't sleep the rest of the night. I listened to the sounds of the forest come back slowly. An owl hooted once, then again. The wind picked up. A twig cracked somewhere nearby. The breathing didn't return, but the second lantern stayed lit for hours. By morning, there was only one lantern. Mine. I stepped outside, my legs stiff, and checked the second tree. No soot, no hook, no signs anything had hung there. I told myself I must have imagined it. A hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation, stress, but I couldn't explain the video. I watched the clip later that day, and though it was mostly darkness, there was a 5-second moment where the camera caught 2 glowing lights, spaced too far apart to be reflections. 2 lanterns. One swings, the other doesn't. I should have packed up and gone home. But I didn't. I stayed. That was just the first night. The next morning, I tried to tell myself the lantern incident had a logical explanation. Maybe I was just more shaken by the silence and isolation than I thought. Maybe some trick of light and reflection, or a sleep-addled mind, made me see 2 lanterns when there was only ever one. But when I went to relight my fire that afternoon, I found something strange in the dirt, just outside the glow radius of my lantern. A shoe print, not a boot like mine. Not even a hiking shoe. It was barefoot, human, long toes, deep heel. Pressed hard into the mossy soil like someone had stood there for a while. I measured it with my hand, almost a full inch longer than my foot. No claw marks, no dragging, just a clean, bare footprint. Alone. There were no other tracks leading to or from it. I didn't pack up. I should have, but I didn't, because part of me wanted to understand what was happening. That night, I didn't sleep inside the tent. I stayed outside with the fire lit, the lantern hanging high on the same crooked pine. I sat against a log with my thermos and my pocket knife, watching the edges of the woods like a nervous animal. Nothing happened for hours. Then, around 2:15 a.m., I noticed something strange about the fire. The flames weren't flickering with the wind. They were leaning in one direction, like something was pulling the heat toward it. But there was no breeze. That's when I heard the breathing again. But not low and steady like before. It was closer. I stood up. My heart thudded in my chest. I spun toward the sound and shined my flashlight into the trees. Nothing. Just bark and darkness. Then I heard it. A short burst of air like someone exhaling from right behind me. I whipped around. Still nothing. But the lantern, it was swinging again, not side to side this time. It spun in full circles, slowly, steadily, as if someone had given it a deliberate twist. Backed up toward the tent, but I didn't go inside. I watched the lantern spin, then stop, perfectly still. Then, out of the corner of my eye, something flashed in the trees. Another light. I turned my flashlight on it, but it disappeared. Still, I could swear I saw the outline of another lantern. I moved toward it, crunching through the underbrush. There it was again, deeper in the trees now, a warm orange glow, hanging low between two narrow pines. I kept moving, though my instincts screamed at me to stop. My boots sank into wet soil. The trees grew tighter, the air colder, and then I found it. Another lantern. Same design, same color. Hanging from a hook nailed into the tree. Freshly nailed, the wood around it still flaked from the blow. I didn't bring nails, or a hammer. I stepped closer to it, slowly lifting my hand, and the flame went out. Instant. Total darkness. My flashlight flickered violently and then died, swallowing me in pitch black. I turned back toward camp, but I couldn't find the path. My footprints were gone. The undergrowth looked different. The trees didn't feel the same. And then the woods came alive with whispers. They weren't words, just the suggestion of language. A hiss, a murmur, breaths strung together like they were trying to form meaning but never quite did. Something brushed past my arm. I spun and ran. Branches whipped my face. My boot hit a root and I fell hard onto my side, knocking the wind out of me. The whispers swelled, a swarm of voices, rising into a breathless hum that vibrated in my chest. I crawled forward, fingers digging into damp soil, until I saw the light of my original lantern again, pale and flickering through the trees like a dying star. I reached camp gasping and bleeding from the elbow, collapsed beside the fire pit, and looked up. There were 5 lanterns now, all hanging in a circle around my camp, each on its own tree, each casting its own strange glow, none of them swinging. I sat there until morning, not blinking, not moving. The fire died to coals. The wind never returned. At dawn, I packed everything. Fast, sloppy. I left behind my journal, a half-full canteen, even the fire ring stones. I couldn't stay. I didn't care what I left behind. I hiked back without a compass. Just went downhill until I hit a creek, then followed it west until I found my truck. Mud-caked, shaking, sunburned. When I got home, I went through my gear. Everything was there, except the original lantern. It wasn't in my pack. I checked my phone one last time. The recording I'd taken the night before still played. But now, there was a second voice in the background, a whisper, right before the clip ended. It said something I couldn't understand at first. I replayed it, slowed it down, isolated it, and what I heard was, 1. Light, returned. I don't go camping anymore. I wasn't afraid of the woods when we set out that Friday. I grew up around them. My parents lived on the edge of a tree line, and I spent my childhood exploring trails, identifying animal tracks, and sleeping under the stars. The forest always felt like a second home. Predictable, peaceful, familiar. That's probably why I convinced my best friend Kyle to join me for a long weekend deep in the national forest 2 hours from town. It was fall, the kind of crisp golden October weekend where the sun cuts through the trees like butter and the smell of decaying leaves hits something nostalgic in your brain. We didn't take an official campsite. I wanted distance. No other campers, no rangers checking permits, no kids playing loud music. I had a topographic map printed from the Forest Service website. About 6 miles in, there was a flat clearing just north of an old ranger road. I'd read about it on a hiking forum. People said it was isolated, quiet, and beautiful. They also said it was weird at night, but I didn't think much of that at the time. Weird on the internet just means cold air or coyotes howling. We parked the truck at the gate, loaded our packs, and hiked for about 4 hours before we found the spot. It was beautiful, a perfect flat circle of ground, ringed by pines and maples. You could still see some of the orange and red leaves clinging to the branches. There was a layer of soft pine needles underfoot. Everything smelled like earth. We pitched the tent, a 2-man dome tent with just enough room to sit up inside, and gathered wood for the fire. Kyle cooked sausages over the flames while I cracked open a beer and leaned back on my pack. By sunset, the clearing was bathed in orange light, and we were already talking about making this our annual spot. That night, we talked until the fire burned low. It got cold quickly after that. The forest fell silent in a way I hadn't expected. No wind, no bugs, no distant howls. Just silence, thick and pressing. I remember crawling into the tent and zipping up the fly. Kyle cracked a joke about Bigfoot, and we both laughed. Then we put on our beanies, turned off our headlamps, and let the dark take over. Sometime around 3 a.m. I woke up. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I heard a slow, rhythmic crunch of the leaves, like someone stepping lightly just outside the tent. Crunch. Crunch. Pause. Then again. Crunch. Crunch. Pause. I opened my eyes and saw the faint silhouette of Kyle lying next to me. I thought maybe it was him. Maybe he got up to pee and was circling back around. But then I heard his breathing. Slow, even. He was still inside the tent. The crunching continued. But it didn't wander off into the woods. It circled us, a steady, even pace. Not rushing. Not wandering. Just walking. In a slow ring around the tent. I held my breath and listened. It circled twice. Then 3 times, Kyle stirred beside me. "You hear that?" He whispered. "Yeah," I whispered back. Neither of us moved. The steps circled a 4th time, then stopped. We waited. Minutes passed. No sound. Just the tight, pressing silence again. Then we heard a soft exhale. Right outside the tent wall. It was low and steady. Not an animal's huff. Not the sharp breath of a deer. It sounded human. Kyle reached for the knife in his boot and held it in his sleeping bag. I clutched my flashlight but didn't turn it on. We didn't unzip the fly. We didn't want to, because neither of us wanted to see what was out there. Eventually, after what felt like an hour, we fell asleep again. Or maybe we passed out from the adrenaline crash. In the morning, the forest looked normal, almost too normal. Birds chirped. Sunlight streamed through the trees. The wind moved gently through the branches. It felt like a completely different world from the one we'd experienced overnight. We didn't talk about it at first, just packed our day packs, boiled some coffee, and acted like nothing happened. But as I walked around the clearing to gather firewood, I noticed something that stopped me cold. Footprints, barefoot prints, deep ones, human-sized, pressed into the soft pine needles, not boot treads. No shoe pattern, just long toes. A wide heel, the arch pressed lightly into the ground. I counted at least 15 of them, circling the tent in a wide ring, but there were no prints leading into the circle, and none leading away. Just the ring, a perfect loop around where we'd slept. When I showed Kyle, he laughed nervously. "Must have been some nut job," he said. "Someone messing with us. 6 miles into the woods?" I asked. "At night? Barefoot?" He didn't answer. We stayed a second night. I don't know why. Maybe stubbornness. Maybe denial. We should have left. That evening, we started the fire early, piled on extra wood, and kept our knives close. I hung a bear bell on a branch near the tent, not to scare off animals but to warn us if anything moved nearby. We didn't drink. We didn't joke. We just sat in silence, listening. At midnight, nothing had happened. I started to think maybe we were overreacting. But then the wind died. Completely. The same sudden, eerie silence from the night before. And then, crunch, crunch, crunch. The circle began again, the moment that first crunch echoed in the stillness. Both Kyle and I froze. We'd been expecting it, bracing for it, even. But nothing can really prepare you for hearing human footsteps again, circling your tent in the middle of nowhere. Crunch, crunch, pause. Crunch, crunch, pause. The exact same pattern as the night before. Same pacing. Same eerie rhythm. Like whoever, or whatever, was out there was following a ritual. I sat up slowly in my sleeping bag. I didn't speak. Neither did Kyle. We just locked eyes in the dark. I reached for the bear bell we'd strung on the nearby branch earlier and gave it a tiny tug. It jingled softly. Almost too softly. Barely enough to cut through the thick silence that had settled over the clearing, and that's when the footsteps stopped, like they had been, listening, waiting. Then we heard movement again, but not from where the steps had been. Now it was behind the tent, then to the left, then to the right. It was circling faster, no longer the deliberate, slow loop from before. Now it was almost agitated. It began to feel less like someone watching us and more like someone trying to confuse us, or corral us. Heard us, Kyle mouth the word "run" to me, pointing toward the entrance flap. But before I could answer, something tapped the tent. Not scratched, not brushed, tapped, with precision, with fingers 3 times. Right behind my head, tap, tap, tap. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My scalp prickled like it had been brushed with static. Then silence. Kyle had his pocket knife out again. I gripped my flashlight. We waited like that for at least 10 minutes. Knees pulled to our chests, barely moving, barely blinking. Eventually, Kyle whispered, "We can't just sit here again." I nodded. We counted to 3, then unzipped the tent and burst out into the clearing. Flashlights on, knives ready, nothing. The forest was still. The fire had burned low, casting weak orange flickers over the leaves. The bear bell hung motionless on its branch. No wind, no noise. But when I swept my flashlight across the tree line, I caught something. Eyes. 2 pale reflections, about 6 feet off the ground, between the trees. Not glowing like an animal's. Just catching the light. Still. Watching. Then they blinked. Kyle saw them too. He whispered, "Dude." We backed up toward the fire slowly, but then the eyes disappeared. We scanned the area again, but there was nothing. Just bark and leaves and darkness. We stood with our backs to the fire for the next 2 hours, waiting, listening, but nothing else happened. At some point, exhaustion won. We went back into the tent, zipped it up, and lay there until dawn. When morning finally came, the clearing was quiet, light, almost peaceful. But when we stepped outside to pack up our gear, we found something waiting for us. Footprints, again, barefoot, deep in the soil. But this time, there weren't just a few. There were dozens. Circles within circles. Overlapping trails of steps that ringed our tent again and again. Not just around the outside, but weaving through our campsite. Around the fire pit. Around the logs where we had sat. Around the bear bell tree. Even right up to the entrance of the tent. There was a pattern to them. Too precise. Like whoever made them had walked the same loop hundreds of times. Kyle crouched down, speechless. His face was pale. "Dude, we didn't hear all of this," he whispered. "There's no way. We would have—" "Maybe we did," I said. "Maybe we just didn't notice." He didn't reply. We tore down camp in record time. We didn't eat, didn't speak, just packed and started hiking back to the truck as fast as we could. But the forest didn't feel the same on the way out. The trail we'd taken in seemed narrower. The trees seemed thicker. The undergrowth clawed at our boots in ways it hadn't before, and we kept hearing things. Small things. A twig snapping. A breath. A single footstep behind us. We didn't stop to check. We made it back to the truck just before noon. As we tossed our packs in the bed and climbed inside, Kyle paused and looked down the trail. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he muttered. "I thought I saw—" "Never mind. We drove without music, without talking. We didn't speak about that night for weeks." Then, one night in November, Kyle sent me a text. "I keep hearing the footsteps at home, like in the hallway. Same rhythm." I called him. He was panicked. Said he'd wake up to the sound of someone walking around his apartment, but when he checked, the floor was empty. No prints, no sign of anyone. I told him I'd been hearing things too, in my backyard, late at night, circling the house. He moved out of state that winter. I haven't heard from him in months. But last week, I went to the edge of my backyard and found something in the snow, a barefoot footprint, just one, right below my bedroom. We weren't lost. At least that's what Jared kept saying. "It's just a detour," he muttered as he folded the topographic map for the third time that morning. But I'd been hiking with Jared since college, and I could tell he was bluffing. His voice had that tight edge to it, the kind he used when things were going wrong and he didn't want to admit it. We'd taken a wrong turn near Shaker Creek the day before, somewhere past the old Ranger Tower ruins. The trail markers were gone. Trees had fallen. What was supposed to be a 6-mile loop turned into a long, confusing detour through overgrown switchbacks and hills that weren't on any of our printed maps. We weren't in danger. We had food, gear, GPS units, which didn't help because of spotty signal, and plenty of daylight. But we were off track, and when you're deep in national forest, far from any ranger station, that feeling gets into your head and twists. We hiked another mile downhill through a dry gully until we found a sign of civilization. A campsite. Not the kind maintained by the park. There were no bear bins, no fire rings, no posted signs. Just a flat area between a wall of trees and a rocky creek bed. Someone had definitely camped there. 2 tents, one red and one green, both sagging like they'd been left unattended too long. A small fire pit with smoke still rising from the ash. A camp chair knocked over. A cooler split open, its contents spilled and reeking. I remember the exact feeling in my stomach when I saw the can of beans in the dirt. Half eaten. The top peeled off, rust already forming around the rim. It looked like whoever had been there left fast. "Hell of a setup," Jared said. "Think someone ditched it?" I shrugged, but I didn't like the look of it. The tents were zipped shut. Jared walked up to the red one and nudged it with his boot. "No response. Anyone in there?" he called out. No answer. He unzipped the flap. Inside were 2 sleeping bags side by side. Neat. Untouched. Each with a pair of boots at the foot. One sleeping bag had a flashlight lying on top. The other had a paperback novel folded open to the middle, the kind of details you leave behind only if you're coming right back. He checked the green tent next. Same setup, 2 more sleeping bags. One pillow still indented like someone had just laid on it. I scanned the area again. 4 sleeping bags. 4 people. But the fire was still warm. No sign of movement in the woods. No tracks, no sign of struggle. No footprints beyond the ones that had been trampled into mud near the creek. No blood. No signs of wildlife attack. Just nothing. I crouched near the fire pit and stirred the coals. They were hot. Whoever had left couldn't have gone far. Jared stood beside me, scanning the tree line. "Maybe they went to get water," he said. "The creek's dry," I replied, "and the water purification kit is still here." He looked down. "Right, we waited for a while. Just stood near the fire, calling out every few minutes. 'Hey, anyone here? Your camp's still set up. Hello!' No answer, not even birdsong. The woods felt wrong. I've spent enough time camping to know that forests have moods. There's calm silence, which is normal. But this wasn't that. This was dead air, like everything was holding its breath. I walked over to the cooler again. The lid was twisted off, lying a few feet away. Inside, everything was torn open. Bread, snack bars, cold cuts, all shredded, but not like a bear. I've seen bear rummaging before. This was neater, but still destructive. Like someone had just ripped into it by hand, not pawed at it. That's when Jared found the notebook. It was tucked under a tree root, maybe 10 feet from the tents. Spiral-bound, the kind you'd get at a gas station. The front cover had a sticker of a blue tent and some initials. E+L. Jared flipped it open. It was a shared trip log. A couple, Emily and Logan. They'd come out here to disconnect and rediscover quiet. Each page had alternating entries like letters to each other. Most of it was sweet. Dinner by the fire. Stars like powdered sugar. No cell service. Logan got spooked by an owl. Emily teased him. Then the entries got weird. October 12th, Emily. Heard something near the creek last night. Logan said it was a deer, but it didn't move like one. I think it was watching us. It didn't blink. It was standing between the trees. We stayed in the tent. It left after an hour. October 13th, Logan. Same thing came back. This time it moved around the tent, in circles. No light, no sound, but it kicked the ash can. Just once, Emily held my hand. I couldn't sleep. October 14th, Emily. Heard breathing. Inside the tent, but no one was there. That was the last entry. No closing note. No packing list. Just those words. Heard breathing. Inside the tent, but no one was there. Jared closed the notebook. Okay, we're leaving. We started backing out of the clearing when I noticed something near the base of the red tent. Footprints. Bear. Human. Circling the tents. One set. Deep in the soil. Just like the ones we'd seen around our own campsite the year before, in a different forest, hundreds of miles away. I pointed. Jared didn't speak. He just turned and walked. We didn't stop until we were a mile out, and even then, we didn't speak for a long time. We didn't report the campsite. We didn't touch the tents. We didn't take pictures. But that night, back at our own site, I woke up to something strange. Smoke. Not. From our fire. From the trees. The faint scent of burning pine and kerosene drifting in from the same direction we'd just come, and somewhere, very faint, the sound of a metal ash can being kicked. We didn't sleep. Much that night, even after the scent of smoke faded, I stayed half awake in my sleeping bag, ears straining for sounds that didn't belong. A twig snapping, leaves brushing, a second set of breathing. But the forest outside stayed still. Too still. By dawn, the light filtered through the tent walls like fogged glass. I sat up slowly, blinking, the back of my neck damp with sweat. Jared was already awake, staring at the roof of the tent, unmoving. His eyes were red, lips pressed in a tight line. "Let's check it," he said. I didn't ask what he meant. We both knew. We packed up our gear, strapped on our packs, and headed back toward the clearing where we'd found the burning campsite. It was only about a mile out, downhill, and then a bend around a split birch tree. When we reached the spot, it wasn't the same. The tents were gone, not torn apart, not burned, just gone. No red, no green, no cooler, no chair. Even the fire pit was gone. The ground was bare, flattened, covered in a strange mix of ash and pine needles that hadn't been there before, like someone had swept the area and dressed it up to erase the memory of what had stood there, but the air still smelled of smoke, faint, lingering. Jared walked to the tree where he'd found the notebook and bent down. His hand came up empty. "Gone," he muttered. I stepped toward where I remembered the footprints circling the tent. They were gone too, but I noticed something else. One new footprint, bare, deep, facing away from where the fire had been. Just one. We didn't say anything. We just started walking. The rest of the day was quiet. The forest didn't feel like a forest anymore. It felt like it was observing us, like the trees had seen something we hadn't, like every shadow between the trunks held its own breath. At one point, around mid-afternoon, Jared stopped and squinted toward the ridge above us. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer, so I followed his gaze. There was someone standing there, just beyond the ridge line, a figure almost blending with the trees. I couldn't make out a face. They were too far, but I saw the outline. A man, maybe, tall, thin, arms hanging at his sides, just watching. "Do you see that?" Jared whispered. I nodded. We didn't call out, didn't move, and then, without sound, the figure stepped back behind a tree and vanished. We climbed the ridge to check, but when we got there were no tracks. No flattened grass, no footprints, just untouched earth and scattered leaves. Jared finally said it. "I don't think anyone left that camp. I think they're still here." I didn't respond, because in that moment I realized something. The fire hadn't burned out that night. We had smelled it hours after we'd left. The ash can sound we'd heard, that same clang we read about in the notebook, it happened again. Not at the abandoned site, but in the woods, like it had followed us, like the campsite itself had moved. That night, we camped on a rocky outcrop. No trees nearby, nothing that could be circled. We didn't light a fire. We didn't speak. At 1:17 a.m., Jared nudged me awake. He was pointing downslope, toward the valley floor. There, glowing faintly in the trees, were two lights, lanterns, flickering orange, spaced about 15 feet apart, just like the tents had been. Smoke rose from the middle, a small curl, like a signal. The campsite had returned, but in a new place. I grabbed my binoculars and looked closer. The tents were set up again. Same red and green, same layout, but this time there was movement, a figure pacing between them. Slow, deliberate, not just one. A second figure emerged, carrying what looked like a small folding chair. Both of them walked in stiff, measured steps. No flashlights, no voices. I passed the binoculars to Jared. "Those aren't the campers," he said flatly. "How do you know?" He handed them back. "They're not walking right." I looked again. He was right. They were moving like puppets, each step mechanical, Synchronized almost. Like they were repeating a sequence. Jared whispered, "We need to go, now." We didn't pack. We left half our gear behind. Just shouldered our essentials and started moving. South, downhill as fast as we could. But the deeper we hiked, the stranger things became. I started seeing familiar things. Too familiar. A tree with a split trunk we'd passed the day before. A cluster of mushrooms growing in the same pattern, even a plastic wrapper. I'd never been to Elk River State Forest before. It wasn't marked on most hiking apps and didn't show up as a popular destination on the forums. That's exactly why I chose it. I was 3 months into a solo travel break, drifting from job burnout, tired of cities, noise, and people. I wanted solitude, pure and uninterrupted. A friend of mine, who used to do forestry work, mentioned Elk River once in passing. Said it was dense, beautiful, underused, and weirdly quiet. "Just be respectful if you go," he'd said. "And don't go wandering at night." That line stuck with me. At the time, I thought he meant bears or cliffs. It took 3 hours of rough driving on old forestry roads to get near the trailhead. The path itself was barely visible, just a faint depression through thick undergrowth. I followed it up a ridge and then into a valley lined with towering pines. There were no markers, no mile signs, just nature, wild and unshaped. By evening, I reached a small flat stretch of land above the river bend. Good cover, no signs of people, a place untouched. That's when I heard the voice. Evening. I turned sharply. A man stood maybe 10 yards away, in uniform, forest green jacket, brown cargo pants, patch on the sleeve. I hadn't heard him approach. He had a kind face, with sharp blue eyes and skin weathered by sun and time. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. He held no weapon, just a thermos. "Didn't expect to find anyone out here," he said, sipping. "Me neither," I replied. "Didn't think there were rangers stationed in this forest anymore." He chuckled. "Most aren't. I just make rounds a couple times a week. Fire risk, littering, you know." He paused, then looked at my gear. "You camping here tonight?" I nodded. He stepped a little closer and pointed to the slope behind me. "Don't pitch too close to that ledge. The wind gets bad after sundown. You won't sleep." "Thanks," I said, unsure how I felt about his sudden presence. He watched me for a few seconds, then added, "One more thing." "Sure. Stay in your tent tonight." I tilted my head. "What? No matter what you hear, no matter what you think you see, stay inside, zip it. Don't peek out. Don't talk. Don't move." He said it calmly without menace, but something in his tone made the hairs on my arms lift. I half laughed, assuming it was a joke. He didn't laugh back. "Got it?" he asked. I nodded. Then he turned, walked into the trees, and was gone. I didn't see which direction he went. I didn't hear a single footstep. Just gone. The sun set quickly after that. I set up my tent, away from the ledge like he said, boiled a pouch of chili, and ate while watching the dark seep between the trees. I kept expecting to hear an ATV engine or a walkie-talkie beep, something to prove he was real. But there was only the wind. I climbed into my tent around 10:30 p.m., zipped the flap tight and pulled my sleeping bag up to my chin. His words kept echoing in my head. "Stay in your tent, no matter what. Don't look, it was ridiculous. I was 33, not a kid. I'd camped for years. I knew the sounds of the woods. Deer stepping light, raccoons snuffling around, branches falling. I told myself it was probably just superstition, some local ranger lore to keep people from wandering at night. Still, I fell asleep with a knife under my pillow. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was still pitch black. No moonlight through the tent walls, just a thick, suffocating dark. I sat up slowly, unsure what stirred me. Then I heard it, a sound I've never forgotten. Laughter, children's laughter. Close. Too close. It wasn't right outside. Not yet, but it was somewhere just beyond the tree line. Light, breathy giggles, like 2 or 3 kids chasing each other. I froze. There were no other camps in the area. No cars at the trailhead. No paths leading to this ridge. There was no reason for children to be out here. But the laughter continued. Getting closer. I thought about unzipping the tent. Just a crack. Just enough to peek. Maybe it was hikers. A family with kids who got turned around. Maybe, don't look, his voice. In my memory, like a bell in my head. I stayed still. The laughter reached the edge of my camp, then stopped. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then I heard soft, padded footsteps. Light, bare, circling the tent. A few feet away, crunch, crunch, pause, then. Something brushed the tent wall. Not a paw, not claws. Fingers. I could feel them trace the edge of the fabric. Then, a voice, high-pitched, childlike. Are you sleeping? My chest locked. It was a whisper. Then another voice, deeper, older. Don't peek. That's cheating. Then they both laughed again, right outside my head. I pressed my back to the far side of the tent, holding the knife tight. My body was shaking uncontrollably. Then came the sound of zippers. Not mine, but mimicking. Right outside the tent wall. Zip. Zip. Back and forth, again and again, like someone dragging their fingers along an invisible tent flap. Then, silence. And after a long minute, the voice of the ranger from deep in the woods. Stay inside, just that. Calm, commanding. Then, nothing. I sat there until dawn. The moment the sky turned gray, I burst out of the tent. Nothing. No tracks. No broken branches. No flattened grass. I packed in 10 minutes and started hiking back. But at the base of the hill, pinned to a tree by a rusty nail, was a folded slip of paper. I opened it. 3 words, written in clean block letters. You didn't look. I didn't stop hiking until the trail turned rocky and the ridgeline opened up to gray sky. My legs ached. My throat was dry, but I didn't care. All I could think about was the voice, the laugh, and the fingers dragging along the tent wall. And that note. You didn't look. Who left it? Was it the ranger? One of those children? Had someone been watching me all night? I reached the ranger station just before noon. It was nothing more than a weathered cabin with a faded flag, a radio antenna bolted to the side, and a dusty bulletin board full of outdated fire warnings and missing hiker posters. Inside, a young guy, maybe early 20s, was sitting behind a desk with earbuds in. He jumped when I walked in. Jesus, you scared me, he said, pulling the buds out. Not a lot of foot traffic up here. I set my pack down hard. Who's the older ranger with blue eyes? Gray hair, wears the older green uniform? He blinked. What? I ran into him up near the river bend, I said. He told me to camp high, warned me not to look outside my tent at night. The guy stared at me for a few seconds. Then he shook his head. There's nobody stationed up there. I frowned. You don't have an older guy on patrol? Late 50s? Short beard? Wears a thermos on his belt? No, sir. It's just me, and sometimes Craig, but he's in his 30s and bald. Someone's out there, I said firmly. He knew the terrain. He gave me a warning. The ranger slowly turned and pointed toward a wall-mounted map. Last ranger assigned to Elk River was in '98. They pulled the team after the budget cuts. The station's just a formality now. Paperwork, weather logging, emergency evac calls. I stared at him. Then who the hell did I talk to? He shrugged. Locals say there's a guy who wanders up there sometimes. Not dangerous, just old school. We've never confirmed it. I left the station shortly after, but I didn't go home. I checked into a nearby motel with shaky Wi-Fi and started searching. I pulled up archived Forest Service documents, hiker blogs, Reddit threads. Over the next 2 days, I found more than I expected. Most were vague. Posts about unsettling nights in Elk River, hearing voices, laughter, even a few mentioning tents being circled. But the most disturbing were 2 blog entries from 2013 and 2015, both by solo campers, both describing an older man in uniform who approached them with a similar warning. Whatever happens, stay in your tent. Don't speak. Don't answer. One blogger claimed she saw something walking upside down through the trees. Another said she woke up to a second tent next to hers that hadn't been there when she fell asleep. But neither of them saw the man again. No confirmation. No photos, no names, just stories. One of them ended her post with a single sentence. I think the ranger isn't warning us about what's outside. I think he's warning them to leave us alone. That line chilled me. I tried to move on. Weeks passed. I didn't sleep well. Every creak in my apartment felt like a footstep. I kept my blinds shut at night. Once, I swear, I heard giggling in the hallway at 2 a.m. But when I checked, nothing was there. Then, in late November, I got a message on Facebook from a man named Trevor Lind. It just said, "You camped at Elk River. So did I. Can we talk?" I replied, and he called me the same night. Trevor had camped there in 2020. Similar experience. Met a ranger at sunset. Got the same warning. Stayed in his tent all night despite hearing crying, laughing, and someone unzipping a phantom tent next to his. But Trevor had looked, and it cost him. He told me he peeked outside the flap around 3:00 a.m. The voices had faded, and curiosity overtook fear. He said he saw 4 children, but their bodies were twisted, not bloody, not monstrous, just wrong. Too long, their arms bent at strange angles, their heads twitching like they were learning how to wear human skin. Then he saw the ranger, standing behind them, arms crossed, not stopping them, just watching. When Trevor blinked, they were gone. He didn't sleep again that night, but the worst part, he said, came later. Back in the city, he started waking to his tent pitched in the middle of his apartment. He didn't remember putting it there. Sometimes the flap would already be open. Sometimes it would be zipped shut, and something would be inside. He moved cities. Still happened. It stopped eventually, but only after he burned the tent. "You didn't look," he told me. "So maybe you're safe." That was the last time we spoke. I tried to check on him 2 months later, but his account... It started like any other backpacking weekend. 3 of us, me, Alana, and Marcus, took off from the city Friday morning. We were headed into Silver Pine Reserve, a dense but scenic stretch of forest just outside the Tri-County boundary. It wasn't as popular as some of the national parks, which was exactly why we picked it. Fewer people, more quiet. Alana brought the topo maps. Marcus had the GPS and compass. I handled the gear and food. We were prepared. Or so we thought. By 3 p.m., we were 10 miles deep, well past the last marked ranger station. The trail was narrow, just a footpath worn into the moss, and the forest around us was thick with ferns, spruce, and a kind of hush that felt deeper than silence, like the trees were soaking up sound. At one point, we passed an old wooden sign nailed to a tree. The words were nearly faded, but you could still make them out. Maple Ridge Loop, 6.2 Naturmen. We cross-referenced it with Alana's map. No Maple Ridge Loop, not anywhere. Maybe it's just an old name, Marcus said, brushing it off. Trails change names all the time. We kept walking. About 2 hours later, we stopped to make camp. It was a solid spot, small clearing near a gentle slope, soft earth, and a downed log to use as a bench. We pitched our tents, started a fire, and made dehydrated stew with a little bourbon to take the chill off. That night, we stayed up late watching sparks disappear into the dark. The trees loomed high around us, black silhouettes against a sky thick with stars. We turned in around midnight. At 3:30 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. The forest was utterly still. I unzipped the tent, stepped out barefoot, and walked about 20 yards away. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, casting long shadows across the moss, and that's when I saw it. A trail, not the one we came in on. This one was narrow, steeper, almost like it had been dug or eroded into the slope. Roots curled around the edge and moss coated the stones. It didn't feel like a modern hiking path, more like something made long ago, forgotten. I froze. It wasn't there before. I would have noticed. Something about the way it curved out of sight felt intentional, like it was waiting. I shook off the chill and returned to camp. Didn't tell the others. I didn't want to spook them. We packed up the next morning and prepared to backtrack in Egypt, but Marcus frowned when he opened the GPS. "This isn't right," he muttered. "What?" He showed me the screen. We weren't on the same trail we'd hiked in on. The elevation was wrong. The landmarks didn't match. The GPS thought we were somewhere south of where we should have been. "How's that possible?" Alana asked, checking her compass. We didn't move. We double-checked the map. Somehow, in the night, our position had shifted 2 miles south. But we hadn't gone anywhere. We laughed it off at first, blamed bad GPS, magnetic interference, even bourbon-induced stupidity. But the weirdness didn't stop. About an hour into the hike, the forest changed. The trees were closer together. The path narrowed. At one point, we had to duck under a massive branch that seemed to arch unnaturally low, like it was purposefully blocking us. Then we found the second sign. Same font, same shape, same weathered wood. Maple Ridge Loop. 6.2 Mibors, but we were 3 miles north of the first one. That shouldn't have been possible. "Okay, this is weird," Alana said. "We're just looping," Marcus offered. "We probably took a turn and didn't notice." "We only followed the marked trail," I replied. "No," he said. "We followed a trail. We took a break by a small stream. That's when I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the map we were using, just in case. When I looked back at the screen, the photo app glitched. It showed the map, but it was blurred. Not motion blurred, just off, like something had smeared the map on screen. The trails looked warped, twisted in on themselves. My stomach turned. Alana saw it too. "That's not right." "Take another," Marcus said. I did. Same result. Even the photos of the campsite from the night before were now showing warped trees, crooked shadows, and what looked like a fourth tent behind ours. There were only 3 of us. Marcus went pale. "We need to get back to the ridge." We picked up our pace. That's when we found the boot. Just one. Lying on the trail, caked in mud, laces torn. Size 9. Not ours. It looked old. Not decaying, just aged. Like it had been out here too long. We kept walking. Another hour passed. No ridge. No trail markers. No sun above. Just a dull gray sky through the canopy, like clouds had rolled in without warning. Eventually, we came to a fork in the trail. There were no forks marked on the map. Both paths looked identical. Same brush, same angle, same slope. We picked the left. After 20 minutes, we passed a third Maple Ridge loop, 6.2 km sign. That's when Alana stopped dead in her tracks. "I saw this exact spot in my dream last night," she whispered. "What?" She pointed. "That crooked tree. The moss patch. That sign, all of it. I saw it. We were standing here. Then she looked at us, her voice shaking. But in the dream, there were only 2 of us. We didn't ask which one of us was missing. We stood at the fork longer than we should have. No one said it out loud, but we all felt it. We were being watched. Not from one direction, from everywhere. The forest had gone still again. No birdsong, no wind, just the quiet weight of 1,000 eyes we couldn't see. Alana stepped back from the Maple Ridge loop, 6.2 at Entwatgert sign, and whispered, "Let's go back." But when we turned, the fork was gone. There was only one trail now, the one ahead. Marcus spun around, searching the trees. No. It was here. I saw it. We had a choice. "It's gone," I said, my throat dry. We pressed on. Not because we wanted to, but because there was no other direction left. After 10 minutes of walking, we found another boot. Not the same one as before. This one was smaller. Alana froze. That's my boot." She bent down and picked it up. Same model, same brand, same faded laces, except both her boots were still on her feet. She took it anyway. We didn't know why. The trail grew stranger from there. The terrain started to repeat. Same rock formations, same clusters of trees, same twisted branches shaped like antlers. At one point, we passed a decaying wooden bridge over a dry ravine. 20 minutes later, we passed it again. Alana marked the bark with her knife. We passed that mark 3 times. Marcus started muttering to himself. Alana stopped checking the map entirely. The GPS was useless. The compass needle twitched constantly. We started measuring distance by time. 30 minutes. No change. 45. Same trees. It didn't make sense. We should have been covering miles. We were walking non-stop, but nothing changed. Then, after an hour or more, we found another sign. Maple Ridge Loop, 6.2 meters, but this one was burned, charred around the edges. The letters melted. We didn't speak. We just kept walking. Eventually, we came across something new, or at least something we hadn't seen before. A tent, old torn, canvas, not nylon, faded green. Mold eating the corners. Inside were 3 sleeping bags, 2 zipped, 1 empty. A broken lantern, a notebook. Alana picked it up and opened it. The writing was barely legible, but one line stood out. We followed the trail past midnight. It led us back to the same day. She flipped the page. Another line. Don't sleep. It moves when you sleep. Then a date. August 19th, same as today. But the year. 1994, Marcus dropped the notebook. We left the tent and ran. We didn't know where we were going anymore. Then the sun disappeared. Not set. Just blinked out. The forest went gray, then black. I checked my phone. Was 7 a.m. And then, ahead, we saw a figure, standing in the middle of the trail, facing away from us, still, wearing a pack, just like Marcus. Who the hell? I started, but Marcus was already walking toward him. Hey. The figure didn't turn. Marcus stepped closer. Hey, buddy. You okay? Then he stopped. I watched as the figure slowly turned its head. Not all the way, just enough for the light to catch one eye. It wasn't right. Too wide. Too flat. Marcus backed away. Then the figure stepped backward into the trees, without turning its body. Gone. We ran again. I don't know for how long. The forest blurred. Time warped. Eventually, we stumbled out onto gravel, an old ranger road, cracked, overgrown, but real. We followed it for what felt like an hour until we saw headlights. A pickup slowed beside us. An old man leaned out. You kids all right? We nodded, breathless. He drove us back to town. We didn't tell him what happened, but here's the part that keeps me up at night. When we got back, I checked the trail reports. Silver Pine Reserve has no trail called Maple Ridge Loop. Never did. Even older maps don't show it. When I tried to find the photo I took of the sign, it was gone, replaced by a corrupted file named Loop 6-2, and that boot Alana took, she kept it. 2 weeks later, she disappeared during a solo hike in Utah. They found her tent, unzipped. Inside was a folded paper sign stuck to the wall with a pocket knife.